Now, the conversations have certainly shifted over the last 18 or so months. The question is no longer how can we survive until the chaos and the crisis is over. It's more about how can we thrive during chaos, because as we have seen, the only constant is change. And today I'm super excited to be joined by somebody who has made reinvention her life mission. Dr. Nadja Zhexembayeva is joining us today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here, honored, and thank you for the invitation.
I've come across you a few months ago on Donald Miller's Brain Story podcast, and you shared incredible statistics and insights and facts and figures about your research. But to kick us off, can you explain your definition of reinvention?
For me, reinvention is a mindset, a method, and a movement that is all about thriving in uncertainty. And for me, reinvention is an immune system for individuals and organizations, today's immune system for today's volatile, uncertain, and disrupted world. Essentially, what reinvention is all about is only one question: how can we sustain and increase the level of life in the system? Whether it's your career, your team, your company product portfolio, your business model, your community, how can we increase and sustain the level of life in your system? That's what reinvention studies, and that's what reinvention implements in practice in real world.
I love this approach about also the sustainability part of reinvention. And to give us some context, you are conducting research on how often industries and businesses have to reinvent yourself. And when I first came across your research, I just wrote down madly the numbers and the years because it was so mind-blowing. Can you share some of those highlights and those insights from your research?
Absolutely. So I'm a recovering academic. A long time ago, I was the Coca-Cola chaired professor working in the field of strategy sustainability. And I wanted to understand why some companies survive disruptions and crisis and others are not able to recover, even with a seemingly simple bump. Why some companies use crisis to grow. Statistically speaking, about 10% of companies around the world end up growing in the middle of significant economic recession, while about 17% of companies die in a typical recession. What separates those 10% from 17%, and how can we be in that 10%? What should we do? And what I discovered is that companies that are adaptive in nature, and also individuals whose careers are adaptive and able to survive disruptions in the professional field, whether it's new boss, your company going bankrupt, COVID-19, whatever other professional disruptions are happening. What we discovered is that it's all about understanding the bigger picture, not on what to reinvent, not on how to reinvent, but when to reinvent. The biggest problem, many people, when you ask people, why did Kodak go down after being the absolute monopoly in the film market? Why did Nokia disappear and became almost a no player in a matter of a short months when they were the darling of telecommunications business? What happened? Most people assume it's the what question. They didn't get the right product, so Kodak didn't get digital, or the how question. They didn't know how to change fast enough. The reality is simply not there. Kodak invented digital photography. It was a product of their own laboratory. It was their own baby. So the idea that they didn't have the right technical or technological solution, they didn't know what to do or didn't know how to do it. Nokia used to be a rubber shoes company before telecommunications. So they know well how to reinvent. The problem is that most companies and most individuals don't understand when to reinvent. And here's those statistics common mind hitter that you are referring to. We've discovered that the average life cycle of a typical business model in the 20th century, up until about late 1980s, early 1990s, the average life cycle was around 75 years. That meant that I could build my business model and milk that cow nonstop for a very long time. And that also meant that I could graduate from college, enter your business, work in your business my entire life, retire from your business, and never see one major change in your business. Small incremental improvements, but not really anything fundamental. That ended about late 80s, early 1990s, because two forces came together. One was geopolitics, the fall of Berlin Wall, the collapse of Soviet Union, the collapse of Yugoslavia, the opening up of China. Suddenly, the whole world is your competition. And it's not your little neck of the woods that you're working with, but everyone is in the game. And the second thing that happened is communications and technology. The dot-com boom mixed with every other technological breakthrough that started picking up on that exponential curve. And these two things combined, geopolitics, the complexity of a globalized economy, combined with technology, created a cocktail in which suddenly, instead of having 75 years on average, a typical business model by around early 2000 shrunk to only 15 and continued to shrinking. So we do this research every 2 years. This year, 2022, we will do the next round. My latest data is September 2020. And the average across all industry, the median life cycle of a business model in 2020 was only 6 years. We're looking at a reality where if you don't reinvent fast, and in that group, in the sample that we have, and we study it around the world across all industries, small, medium-sized businesses, all the way to multi-corporate, hundreds of thousands of employees, what we discovered is that 60% of companies are reporting that they need to reinvent every 3 years or less to survive and thrive today, with about 16 of them reinventing every 12 months or less. This is telecom, this is entertainment, this is fast-moving consumer goods, anybody who's touching the end consumer. Reinventing once every year versus reinventing once every 40, 50, 60 years, that's a different ballgame altogether. So that's where we are right now.
This is so fascinating because it's so much uncertainty. And you grew up in the Soviet Union, and Kazakhstan went through probably the biggest crisis that anyone could ever imagine, with no currency, with no politicians. And it looks like you've literally grown up in chaos and crisis. But, Australia, for example, we have been sheltered for many, many years. We haven't seen any big disruption. COVID-19 was the biggest hit probably in a very long time. And still now people are more aware that those disruptions happen all the time. COVID-19 was a sign of its time. It's probably then, as you said, technology, it might be another disease, whatever it might be. And still so many people are so resistant, especially the older generation of leaders. What can we do about it? And why do we resist so much against change?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why we resist against change. Number one is there's a biological reason that is very short-lived, but we have a capacity to extend it for an indefinite period of time. You all study the biological reason called fight or flight syndrome. You cover it in your biology class in high school. And the idea is that when your body experiences threat of any kind, or perceived threat, it doesn't know, is it really a lion or just a strange noise, but your body gets alert when it thinks there is a potential threat. That's COVID-19, that's new regulation, that's new competitor, that's new customer preference, whatever is the disruption for new boss, new market entrance, whatever it is. Your body experiences a potential threat. It activates a fight or flight syndrome in which your body literally turns off your brain. Quite literally, the way body operates is that it only uses the vital functions for survival, meaning the muscles necessary to fight, to kill the enemy, or to flight, to run away from the enemy. And that is your arms and your legs. So what happens when the fight and flight syndrome activated, why the blood pressure goes up and you're pumping blood in that meeting and your heart is beating hard when you heard the news and your blood pressure is going up, is because your body is trying to get the blood supply to the extremities, all the way down to your arms and to your legs. That's why it's hard working, pushing that blood out, but brain is completely unnecessary for survival. So it actually takes blood away. And that's why very often in meetings, we get this brain freeze. We have no new ideas when we're in stress. We literally have not enough oxygen to produce fresh ideas. And in the same way, there is another function of the brain called auditory exclusion, where your brain stops recording any messages that are not related to survival directly. So I know I've been in meetings where I don't remember what's been said. I've been in such a stress response. I literally did not record. So it's not you, it's your body, you're healthy, you're normal. This is what's supposed to happen. The good news for a typical body, this response is about 90 seconds. From the moment the adrenaline starts kicking and the cortisol and other hormones start hitting my bloodstream to the moment the kidneys start cleaning out, for a typical human being is about 90 seconds. The problem is that we can start that 90-second cycle again and again. I can come back to a coffee room or to the toilet or to a smoke room and say, can you believe this, Madam Hours or whatever? Can you believe what they're doing, and start swearing and cussing? And I start a new cycle, a new cycle, a new cycle. And unfortunately, we've lived in a world where it's considered to be very good to hold a grudge and be in that aggressive state for years and years and years. I know people who are still in that 90-second cycle from the last economic recession of 2008. I know countries who've been in those same 90-second cycle for the last 90 years. They're still upset about something that happened, God knows when. So it is on us as leaders of first ourselves and then the teams around us to say, give our people our 90 seconds and then help them exit that state into a more productive state. And here it's all about creating long-term systems. So we talk about the 6 pillars of reinvention as a system, which is having a healthy practice of anticipating change, having great standard operating procedures for designing change, having excellent skills in the company for implementing change, and having investment made in your reinvention mindset for your people, in the reinvention culture where change is awarded and supported and celebrated, and reinvention ready systems, things like budgeting and HR and IT, that makes it easy for you to be adaptive or creates barriers for you to make a new decision or to adapt. So it has to become, after the first 90 seconds, we have to start investing in a more long-term systems to address the resistance to change.
Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned those pillars, because it shows that it's a process to the madness and we're not just blindly running in all directions and see what works and what doesn't work and just go wherever the best results come up. And you also say that we need to make reinvention something that's ongoing. It's like taking a shower. If you don't do it that often, you are starting to stink. The same happens with your organization. I love this metaphor for it. So the question is, how do we actually reinvent on a small scale? And also, how do we know when it's time to do the big reinvention? When is it maybe even too early?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a whole method. The reinvention method has now 9 different tools, and it also relies very heavily and weaves together the best of strategy, including Blue Ocean strategy, the best of design thinking, Agile and Scrum, plus leadership, organizational development, and change management. So there's a whole field and a budding group of professionals around the world that are building out the very pragmatic answers to your questions, but I will just point you to a few directions. Number one is the distinction between Reinvention 1.0 and Reinvention 2.0. Reinvention 1.0 is treating change like a project. This is more like change as a wedding. We put together a big wedding once. Because we are not planning to get married every 2 months, we outsource it to a professional who has a house or the building and the catering, and the dress is made by a professional and the shoes are made by the professional and the music and whatever else. And if you want a wedding planner, that would be equivalent to a consultant. Same with a lot of reinvention efforts in businesses today. We continue to treat them as a project. We put together this fancy project, or sometimes we call them programs. Project Arrow or Program Everest, that is there to design and implement this one-time change. It's a big wedding. Often we bring in a wedding planner, a consultant from the outside, and being one of the proud consultants in the field, I keep telling people, stop hiring us, just stop. You need to, you are at the time where you need your in-house capacity to reinvent. You cannot rely on a wedding planner. It doesn't happen every, 50 years anymore. It's happening every 2 weeks, and you cannot hire a wedding planner every 2 weeks. You need to build this in-house. So Reinvention 1.0 is changes a project. We do it once. It's a big one-time event. It has the beginning, middle, and end. At the end of it, we're all drunk and we're done and we're celebrated and we're married and we'll move on to normal life. That's used to be the case in very long life cycles. So 20th century life, long business cycles, yes, reinvention is a wedding. Short business cycles, Reinvention 2.0, it's more like taking a shower. You do this on a regular basis, if not every day, every couple of days. You have dedicated experience around it. You're not every day inventing how to take a shower. Today I'll take a shower with my tea, and tomorrow with water, and day after tomorrow with I don't know what. You are not hiring people to wash you. You are not you are not learning every steps and changing the steps every time. There's a process, there's a skill, there are resources, there's soap and water and towels and everything necessary, and you know how to do it. Nobody's washing you and all of that. So that's what we're talking about, is building a system. And in some companies, this looks like a new dedicated function. We have companies who now have chief reinvention officers. We even have a state here in US that was the first state to hire a chief reinvention officer for the entire state as a government official for the state of North Dakota. And it becomes a whole function with its own dedicated effort, because you cannot possibly run the business and reinvent the business simultaneously. It's like you have a functional vacuum cleaner plugged in and vacuuming a floor, and you are trying to transform that into a functioning TV set while running and cleaning the house. It's very, very unlikely that that will be a successful endeavor. So it's in a dedicated function in the company. Sometimes it's chief transformation officer. Sometimes it's another role that picks up. So I've seen chief strategy officers picking that up. I've seen chief people officers, chief organizational health officers picking that up. And sometimes it is about creating a new business entity. It can be a venture capital fund, it can be a side story, it can be a dedicated group. But the idea is that they are running a process. They're there learning how to do this better and better. They are creating standard operating procedures that are fit specifically for your industry and for your company. It's not a generic experience.
Oh, this is so fascinating. And it also shows the evolution of careers. When you just said the Chief Reinvention Officer has just been introduced. And I remember a few years ago when we got, as the Brisbane City, introduced the Chief Digital Officer, and everyone was like, oh my God, it's so exciting. And it's only been a few years, and now we see this new evolution of roles. And one of the pillars that you also mentioned is the skills that we are able to implement change and reinvention. What are those skills that we need in order to thrive in this chaos and in this ever-changing world of work?
Well, it is quite a lot of it starts with the mindset, the ability to work with your mindset and the ability to mold and manage yourself first. So everything around self-management, including your emotional intelligence, your political intelligence, your social intelligence, all kind of intelligences that you need to practice to be able to adapt and thrive. There's, of course, a lot that has to do with integration. I noticed that one of the greatest things that is missing in business right now is the ability to integrate across functions, across business units, across silos, and also across different schools of thought. All the different schools of thoughts fight with each other. The strategy people hate change management people. The change management people keep frowning on the design thinking people. It's not effective. So the ability to integrate and build bridges and co-align and create synergies, whether it's between functions, whether it's between business units, or it's between products and tools, that becomes a huge, huge new direction of skill sets and capacities. And of course, some of the things that I already mentioned, anticipating change, designing change, and implementing change. Without those three, it's very hard to be adaptable and relevant, to stay relevant in today's world.
And this is such a great tip that we actually start with the mindset, not the skill set, because you also said we're going through a change and disruption probably every 6 to 7 years now, which means if you're going to university and you get a 3 or 5 years degree, by the time you finish, you probably have to relearn and reskill already anyway. So there is not one pathway that you can say, this is my one and only career, because we are changing roles and jobs and careers more frequently. Have you got any tips for people who might be in a more traditional, more rigid, more structured and highly regulated environment, like say the army even? How can professionals reinvent themselves, or in even government institutions where we like the structure?
Absolutely. So on your point around careers, I'm absolutely with you. My daughter is almost 18. And she's the last year at home. She's choosing a college right now. And of course, she's been very stressed around, what do I choose for my career? And I keep reminding her, Lila, you're choosing for 5 to 7 years tops. Who cares? Treat it as an experiment. You're not choosing for life. Okay, you will try something, and some of it will be exciting and you will learn, and some of it will be disastrous and you will learn and you will move on. So it's not like you're choosing for life. Relax. Just choose something that gives you energy, that brings up your level of life for the next 5 to 7 years, and stick with that. Ride that wave. Study that particular capital called vitality, your life in your own system, and manage it the way you manage your bank account. But coming back to more structured environments, it's actually where I work the most. I spent quite a lot of years working in mining and metals. And of course, Australia is heavy leader in the mining industry. And a lot of the things that we were looking at around automation and how to run the mines efficiently came from Australia. So that is an example of a very army-like, high discipline environment where the reasons why this is so regulated is because they're a danger to human life and to the natural environment. So you have to be extremely disciplined and regulated. And for me, it's always about understanding that it's both ends. We cannot live without discipline. And today we can also not live without adaptability. And here I borrow a lot from nature. I'm a student of biomimicry. It's a wonderful field of research that learns and studies how can we take something that biology took billions of years to perfect and use it in human environment. And there's wonderful examples of scientists who use the way birds perfected flight to design cars and airplanes and boats, because the aerodynamics and the dynamics with fluid are very, very similar. There are examples of using how spider webs the web in the textile industry, because the strength of the spider web compared to the weight and the lightness that it can hold, the weight of a fly being so light is actually still unparalleled. We have not yet been able, mathematically speaking, to beat the spider in building that strength of a textile. So same in the human life or organizational design, there's a lot we can learn from nature. And nature always balances out this discipline and the limitations with the emergence. And when you think about how forest develops, what's the strategic plan for the forest? How can forest be more adaptable? There's some very predictable things that forest does. For example, diversity. Forest always builds on diverse species. You will not find a forest with 2 species, because forest knows if there's a fire, or if there's a monsoon of some sort, or if there's a flood, that one species may die and I'm done. So I need to diversify. And if you bring diversity into your system, you automatically make it much more prepared for a potential disruption, because you have more variety of responses in the system, even if you're in a highly structured environment. Another thing that forest does is duplication. it makes sure that there's more than one person, more than one species that is able to perform a certain function. And there's so often that I see structured systems where everyone does their part, but if one part, I don't know, got sick, something happened to that part, the whole system stops. Nobody can work. That is an example of a system that is way too lean for today's unpredictable environment. You all remember in the supply chain management for longest time, we've been using the principle of just-in-time management, that everything should show up just in time, that you should not have a big inventory of the raw materials because that's cash sitting on your shelves. You should not have production process set up where people are just waiting until the previous step is done. Everything should be done just in time. And also in terms of your own end result products, they should not be sitting on your shelf. They should only be produced when there's an actual customer ready to take it off your hands. Great idea when the world is stable. The moment the world becomes volatile, one ship stuck in one canal means 10% increase in the prices of the entire world in retail. We are in a different world. We have to find a way to create discipline and adaptability. And there are a lot of principles, solutions, and cases on how you can do that.
This is what makes your work so exceptional, I would say, because you connect academic research with real life examples, and also you use a lot of lateral thinking. What I've realized, that you say, what does this industry do? What does environment do? What does the nature do? And how can we learn from them? And there's not one way or not one answer, because we don't know what happens tomorrow. We don't know what happens next year. So even a 5 years strategy, it's nice, but is it possible? Probably not. It might be more so the vision of 5 years, but how we get there, it might change along the way. And this is also where it comes down to having the right mindset. We need to be able to say, well, this was relevant last year, or even yesterday. It's not relevant today or tomorrow or next week. Have you got any tips or little tools or exercises that you do to reinvent yourself every single day? And maybe the big reinvention with the capital R, what's the difference in doing something small every day to also shift our pattern and the thinking? And then when can we apply that in a big reinvention that we might change industry or profession?
Well, first and foremost, one of our tools is called the Reinvention Portfolio Canvas, where we show 9 different ways, 9 different types of reinvention, one of them being innovation, one of those radical, big, disruptive things you can do. Innovation is a great tool. It's just one of 9. And sometimes it's a right fit for where you are, and sometimes you don't need to innovate. There are other things more incremental in nature, more subsystem in focus that you can do. So one thing I practice, I don't practice it every day. I would be exhausted if I would be reinventing every day. But one thing I do practice every few months for our team, our sprints are about 3 months long. Every 3 months, we renew our portfolio and say, okay, what's on top of our priority list? What's our portfolio of reinvention projects? And is it the balanced portfolio? Does it have enough disruptive things we're working on, but also enough incremental and kind of organizational things that we're working on to catch on and to be prepared for the big disruption? So that's about once every quarter for us, but I know people who do it as often as every 2 weeks. Another thing I do is I concentrate a lot on being clear on what I say no to. It's very, very loud world right now. We are bombarded by so many messages. There's so many amazing ideas. I can Google hundreds of truly amazing ideas of what I can spend my life on. So being able to decide what I say no to and having the discipline of saying no to as many things as necessary, to most of the things, is what I practice. So Friday is my no day. Usually during the week, I add things to our plans, our priorities. Our team uses team management system where all the tasks and all the deadlines and all the assignees are all work. So it keeps growing. And at the end of the week, I take a scalpel and I cut out everything that was looking good on Monday and Tuesday, until I came to my senses and realized that it's just too much or it's not the right relevance. So this idea of having the moment of yes and then having a moment of no and being okay with changing your mind and taking things off your list and readjusting the plans and being very adaptive and emergent in your planning as well has been very, very good practice for us. And finally, reinvention is equally about what you keep, not only what you change. So if you spend enough time honoring, understanding, analyzing, and truly, truly protecting what should not be changed, whether it's your human capital, your talent and skills, your particular know-how, your spirit, your mindset, your product, your business model, your customer base, your segment, I don't know what it is. But as long as you know what is the core that is unchangeable, reinvention becomes easy because you don't feel like you're betraying yourself, that you're losing yourself every day, that you are, killing the baby that you've built for years and years, and that product or that company was a legacy and now it's all destroyed. When you understand what's truly unchangeable and can never be touched and destroyed and can never be threatened, then it's very easy to imagine a new version of that thing in the form of a new product, in the form of new process, in the form of new market or whatever else. So those would be the three practices.
And, this is again what makes your method so sustainable and so practical, because it's not a one tool and a one hit wonder and it works for everyone, because it doesn't. There are different tools, and it's so refreshing to say that innovation is one tool. It's not the tool, it's one of many.
A wonderful tool. And I love using this tool when it fits the need. There are situations where truly innovative solution, new at its core, disruptive and truly innovative is necessary. And there are many times where you add one more inch, one more dot, one more, drop of innovation into a system, and it will just explode because it's already overwhelmed. So you have to be very sophisticated and mindful in choosing the unique combination of tools that are necessary for your system. Right now, I often tell the students of Reinvention Academy that your job is to create the perfect dish every single day. There are like a endless all-inclusive buffet in front of you. There are meats there, and there's fish here, seafood here. There's vegetables here, and fruits here, and desserts here. Every day, your system needs a different plate to stay alive, to stay healthy, and to thrive. Some days you should be heavy on proteins, and other days you should be better on carbs. Some days you should work with fruits, and some days maybe fermented vegetables. But it's understanding the need of your system and creating a plate of tools and solutions that is uniquely fit for that day. Because in 2 months, your company will be a different company and the plate will change altogether.
This also ties in perfectly with what you call the Titanic Syndrome. Can you quickly explain what does that actually mean, and how do we see that we are going into this Titanic environment?
Absolutely. So when I was studying companies that do not survive, the companies that are not able to meet a potential threat and pivot enough or find a response that allows them to stay afloat, I realized that the pattern of behavior in those organizations is very similar to the story I heard from a wonderful Spanish professor, Juan Serrano, who uses the movie Titanic in his classroom to teach leadership. And I started doing my own research. I took my team and we went to read all the historic documents, to read the Senate hearings, to read the reports, to see what we can uncover that is validated as a historic fact. And I realized that, yes, indeed, this sounds very much like what happened on Titanic, because the reason why Titanic didn't survive, and very often when I ask, what killed the Titanic, people are like, iceberg, duh, what is there? Yeah, it's very tempting to blame the iceberg. That's what we say about business. Competitors killed me. The government regulation killed me. COVID-19 killed me. Digital killed me. Customers killed me. It's very tempting. My parents killed my career and my life dream, or whoever else, my older brother, or my younger brother, whoever took it away from me. It's so tempting to blame the iceberg. The reality is that Titanic experienced a deeply rooted set of behaviors that manifested in hundreds of different ways, all throughout, in the way it was built, in the way it was started, in the way it never had a testing in real waters, in the way it was run. It was this fundamental syndrome that I call Titanic Syndrome, where an organization or an individual bring about their own collapse because of arrogance, because of excessive attachment to the status quo, or because of inability to notice and adapt to new and emerging reality. And that was the case, this fundamental arrogance, this idea that we're too big to fail, that we're too good to fail. We are monopoly, or we are an army, who will take us, or we are, that idea is one of the biggest reasons why organizations and particular careers disappear. And the idea that my best practice, my past success is a guarantee of my future is one of the pitfalls of my own life, right? Very often I sit with my team and I'm like, I've done this 100 times, guys. I know what I'm doing. And they're like, that smells like Titanic Syndrome. Remember the story of First Officer Murdoch? He's done it 100 times too. So like, you have to create a culture where this kind of truth can be spoken to power, and that your employees are not afraid to tell you, hey, you begin to act like Titanic Syndrome, check yourself. But that is where that research comes from. And I see a lot of companies, whole regions that are infected with Titanic Syndrome with this idea that we're just too good to fail, or we're too big to fail, or we're too protected to fail, or our past success is what will guarantee the future. And it's simply not the case.
And you live and breathe the ongoing reinvention, because also the Chief Reinvention Handbook, you are actually, it's a living and breathing document. It's not a one-off print. You're reinventing and adding new tools and examples every 2 to 3 months, which is crazy, but fascinating.
Yeah, we have a designer meeting this morning. I was debating how to change one tool. There is this 6 pillars of reinvention that I mentioned to you. Next week, we're unveiling the 7th pillar. And we were back and forth redesigning that tool and changing the way it will be laid out and how it will be explained, because I was wrong. It was 6 pillars 2 years ago. And now that we worked in so many industries and so many countries, we have more than 5,000 people testing our tools on the ground in very different type of businesses, in very different type of countries, all the way from New Zealand to Canada, and from far north of Russia to Chile and Brazil. There's so much that is being tested that when the guys come back and say something is not working, we redo the tools. And we have a dock, a kind of parking lot of tools that are yet to be developed, that will have the first draft or second draft. What you see in the book is at least draft 10. And it keeps developing. So we update the tools, we load them on the resources pages, we call up our alumni. We will have an alumni meeting next week. We call up our alumni of the Reinvention Academy, present the new tool set and say, hey, this is what the update. This is the best thinking as of now. But remember, next month or next year, it will be too late to disagree with me, because I will already change my mind. So use it while it's here.
And this is such an important part. We need to share what we know right now, because yes, tomorrow we know a lot more, but eventually we never make any decision and we procrastinate if we're trying to find the perfect answer, because there will never be the perfect and the one answer. It's evolving. And it also gets rid of your arrogance that you say, today I'm right, tomorrow I might be wrong. But I've given my best with the knowledge that I had at that day. And this is great that you live and breathe this. Now, this is also a perfect wrap up. What is next for you? What is in for 2022? Where can we connect with you and learn more what you're up to?
Well, we have a big plans. First of all, the reinvention method is updated, and I'm more than sure that 2020 will see an increase in tools. We are at 9 tools right now, and we have a political audit, the audit of stakeholders using emotional intelligence, political intelligence, and rational intelligence. That tool, that audit is coming out, and many other tools. That's number 1. So the research and development, the actual intellectual work continues quite heavily in 2022. Second, we have big plans to hold our first Global Reinvention Summit in the end of September, early October of 2022, and bring best cases and actually award the most amazing reinvention stories so that we can start celebrating and learning from each other and creating communities of practice. So that's the second thing. And for those who are interested in trying us out, every few months, we have a live free 5-day workshop that we host online called the Easy Reinvention Lab. And that's the easiest way to connect with us. If you just go to learn-to-reinvent/lab, you will always find at least one lab that is happening in the next few weeks or next month. That is the easiest starting point. The labs are super, super smooth. They have an amazing workbook that allows you to go from different fields of study. We use a little bit of blue ocean strategy. We use our own Titanic Syndrome test. We use the best in neuroscience and psychology. We use the best in the reinvention community. So you get the workbook. It's 1 hour a day. Just grab a spot, bring your team, start working. There's no cost. You just need to show up. That's the biggest thing. So I invite you all to register for the upcoming lab. The first one in January is January 10th, but then there's another one at the end of February, and they're coming every few months.
This is amazing, and I couldn't vouch for your work any further. So I'll, of course, put all the links in the show notes, and really I'm very excited to see what you are up to next and what your next findings are. So thank you so much for being here today, Nadya.
My honor, and Petra, thank you so much for inviting me.